So thank you for joining us again, and good morning. Just a few housekeeping items first. This session is being recorded, as you can see from Mark's message, and you will get links to it in the next week or so from the marketing team. You can feel free to look at it again or share with any colleagues if you want. But, you know, you will get this link again in about a week. So this week, it's great to have Jon Hope with us from Sophos. He's going to discuss some of their new offerings, some exciting stuff there, I have to say. But I'm going to kick off the session and I'm going to spend a little bit of time looking at some Copilot announcements that have been made over the last month or two. Okay. So the biggest announcement is that Copilot is now going to be wave 3. So basically, this is the latest version of Copilot. It's not quite out yet, but some of you may have seen a link in your Microsoft 365 admin to join the Frontier Cowork program. So the Frontier program is basically the Copilot preview. So if any of you want to look at early versions of Copilot, join that Frontier program. So some of the big changes are going to be Copilot Cowork. It's not a new product. It's a feature that's going to sit within Copilot, and I'll dig more into that in a minute. It's going to have multi-model support. At the moment, it's going to be adding Claude from Anthropic to the OpenAI models already in Copilot. But there's a caveat here for UK users. It is off by default. You can choose to turn it on. But the reason it's off by default is it doesn't meet data residency restrictions a lot of you will be working to. The advantage of Claude is it works better with larger data sets. So if you're working on large models, large projects with lots of information, it works better. It's got better performance at reasoning than Copilot, than the OpenAI model. And it's probably a little bit more accurate as well, based on whatever information you provide it. But there is that caveat as to whether you want to turn it on or not. Then there's WorkIQ that you will see. Now, WorkIQ, again, isn't a product, and it isn't even a feature set, but I'll speak about it as we go through. And then there's Agent 365. Agent 365 is a new product, and I'll discuss that as we go. So, as I've said, Cowork is currently in the Frontier program. It's based on Anthropic Cowork, so not Claude, so it'll work even if you haven't got the Claude model turned on. But what Microsoft have done is they've worked with Anthropic to incorporate their agent modeling into Copilot. What it supports WorkIQ again, which I will speak about in a minute, and it will work without Claude, as I have said. But it basically gives you embedded agentic capability. What this means is you can create a prompt that says, I need to prepare for a customer meeting next week. Can you summarize all my meeting notes, my Dynamics 365 data, my Office 365 data? Can you summarize that all for me? But can you then create a presentation for that customer? Can you create a document based on all that information and send some emails to the customers to prepare for it? So all these steps will then carry on in the background, and you will be able to work on new prompts while that is working in the background. And you can stop that working and give it more information as it goes through. So it's like agent capability, but embedded into Copilot in the first instance. Work IQ is the intelligence layer for Copilot. It uses your standard work data like SharePoint and OneDrive, but it uses data from Dataverse. So if you've got Dynamics 365 CRM, you can get data in from there and from Power BI or Power Apps you've created. So it brings more data together, but it then adds more context to you. It knows who you've worked with that data and gives you better context when it's creating these responses. So it's just a background layer that works there. Agent 365. Now, Agent 365 is basically a new product. It's in, if any of you've seen, it's in the eSAM product that's available for commercial now. No news about anything for education. But eSAM is basically E5 with Copilot and Agent 365, but also with the Entra suite and the Intune suite built in. Basically, it's a control plane to give visibility into what's happening with agents. It gives you better security because you can assign Entra and conditional access policies to agents moving forward. Gives you agent governance and agent management. All of these products are you're probably looking at the start of April before you will start seeing them in general availability. Moving on from Copilot, I've spoken about Microsoft Archive before. The biggest update here, instead of being SharePoint site level archive, you can now do file level archive. So an useful update here. It's in private preview, but it will be out soon. It also provides document version trimming. So if you want to reduce the number of versions of each document in SharePoint, there's tools in here to help you there. And I'm going to finish off with some Copilot updates in Teams. Not necessarily new, some of these. So the AI interpreter agent should be available now, which allows individual users within a meeting to choose what language they're speaking in. And then AI will automatically interpret via speech so that everybody hears in their own language what is being said. So that's in there. The facilitator agent, again, is fairly new. It sits inside a meeting and controls agendas to make sure you're on time, which I should have on this because I'm running slightly over. In Teams Phone, Copilot can, if you've got a Microsoft 365 Copilot license in Microsoft Teams telephony, it will, when you're transferring a call, it will summarize what the first user spoke about when you're transferring it. So you've got a summary of what the call is about before you answer the call. And call summary then is like meeting recap, which gives you an automatic summary of what went on in the calls. Okay, so that was a very brief introduction to the new Copilot. But I'm sure you'd be glad to hear from Jonathan rather than me all this time. So I'm going to pass you over to Jonathan now.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for that update. That's interesting and a little terrifying how much AI has come on. Exciting stuff. Right. Okay. Let's get going with the Sophos update. So I wanted to talk to you all about three things. Not really about me. In the interest of time, I'll speed things up a little. So first of all, just a quick update with regards to our MDR service that you'll have hopefully heard me talking about before. In addition, we're going to talk a bit about ITDR and looking at the challenges of identity-based attacks. So that's a new product area for Sophos, and we're also going to look at a second new product area as well, which is workspace protection. So quite a lot to get through, but just a high-level view, all of those things. So first of all, managed detection and response. Like I said, many of you will have heard me talking about MDR before. What I'm going to do in this session is just give you a very quick recap on why MDR is essential in the modern threat landscape. And it's basically because the vast majority of at least successful cybercrime activities are actually carried out by a human being. So the media would typically have you believe that this is what a cyber criminal looks like. They're always portrayed to be teenagers in hoodies, hanging out in mom and pop's basement. The reality is, however, that the vast majority of cybercrime is actually perpetrated by a very small number, around 40 gangs at any one time that are active perpetrating cybercrime, and they have huge financial resources, as you can see by this small collection of very expensive cars. But they also have at their disposal as well a huge quantity of human resources, which is why, like I said, the vast majority of attacks, they really involve successful human activity. And unfortunately, the reality is that no matter what tech you buy, ultimately, if you find a determined enough human, they will find a way around it. So you can invest in whatever tech you want from a cybersecurity perspective, and unfortunately, it's not going to protect you against every single threat that's out there. And particularly when you look at the way cyber criminals carry out their nefarious deeds. So we see a lot of things like identity-based attacks, which I'll talk about in a second. So credential abuse, logging in as your legitimate users because they've probably socially engineered usernames and passwords or session tokens out of those users. Very difficult, if not impossible, for technology to work out whether that's legitimate or not. You've also got living off the land, massive cybercrime tactic of basically using the tools at their disposal when they get into your estate. So using tools like remote desktop, using tools like PowerShell, all of which ship with the operating system as standard. And again, you need them for your workflow, to support your students, to support your staff. So how on earth can you determine whether those activities are actually legitimate or not? You've got multi-stage attacks. Of course, many of you will have supply chains that are quite lengthy. Even basic attacks like remote ransomware, you've got one device that's actually causing a problem and somewhere else is where the actual effect is taking place. So very difficult to piece together the big puzzle. And then you've got exploiting weaknesses, and weaknesses involve things like technology weaknesses, like not patching, not updating successfully, and also functional operational weaknesses. So I'm sure none of you are sitting around in your offices bored looking for something to do. IT teams are typically grossly under-resourced. You probably go home in the evening and at weekends and bank holidays and that kind of thing, and outside of academic times, all of which exposes the organization to potentially a more serious form of attack because there's nobody actually actively monitoring the estate at any one time. So in the past, what we would have told you to do is go out and buy products like EDR, like XDR, whether that be Sophos or one of our peers in the cybersecurity community. Problem with those searching tools are that it is still very easy to miss warning signs. They do exist. The average dwell time in a cybercrime activity now is about 3 days. So the cybercriminals get in and 3 days later, they're dropping ransomware on your desktops. There are still plenty of signs that something's going to happen. We see recon, we see cybercriminals escalating privileges, moving laterally, exfiltrating data, all of which happens before the really bad stuff happens. But the problem is those warning signs, they often get missed, even though they're there. those warning signs get missed. Because if you think about your university, your academy, whatever kind of estate you're in, then just every single desktop, laptop, every switch, every firewall, every access point, every router, pretty much every piece of software, they're all generating logs, and it's really hard to find the things that tell you that you're about to become a victim. There might be just one little warning sign in there somewhere. And the other challenge, of course, is you go out and buy threat hunting tools. Tools does not equate skills, essentially. We already know that buying tech isn't enough. I'm afraid going out and buying threat hunting tools is not going to make you a threat hunter overnight. In the same way that if I went out and bought a set of boxing gloves, then it's not going to make me a fighter. It's not who I am. Having tools is one thing. The ability to use it essentially is something else. So Entra MDR. And what we do here is basically provide cybersecurity as a service, because our belief is that organizations of all sizes really struggle with cybersecurity. If you look at major banks, hotels, airlines, if they can't do cybersecurity properly with the kind of budgets they get to play with, then how is a poor, beleaguered academic institute ever going to do cybersecurity effectively on their own? It's kind of unrealistic. So what we suggest is collaboration. So our MDR service basically works alongside the tech you've got, and we have a team of specialists working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, trying to find those little warning signs for you, and then maybe taking action. The reason I've brought MDR up today is since we last spoke, we now offer 350 different technology integrations, all of which offer better security outcomes. And we've actually made a decision to include these integrations as part of the standard MDR service. I don't want to say they're free, because obviously, you do have to buy the service. But in the past, you'd have been buying everything that had a dollar sign on it, whereas now we've elected to include all these integrations. And essentially what that means is we can bring all that lovely juicy telemetry into our estate, and then we can carry out actions. And it's really important. One of the key things that we talk about a lot now is our story about being better together with Microsoft. So we're of course acutely aware that Microsoft is pretty much omnipresent in the vast majority of organizations. It is actually now our biggest source of telemetry. So if we look at the stats here, we see that 41% of cases now have basically information has been provided for the Microsoft estate, and whether that be Windows Defender, whether it be the Windows event logs, and the whole plethora of suites that Microsoft offer. So it's giving us really good visibility into the estate. And like I said, we don't charge for this integration. And everybody gets value. So no matter which end of the spectrum you're at, whether you've got the most basic form of licensing, or whether you're an E5 or even now an E7 license since these slides were put together, then you do get all of those benefits in terms of that telemetry that arrives with our threat hunting team. And these are some of the attacks that we see. Are really, really common. So things like session hijacking, which is basically just a ploy to replicate your legitimate users, using tools like Evil Jinx to lure your users into going to a fake form and basically scraping the session token. And that session token is typically valid for 7 days, which basically means the cyber criminal logs in as one of your staff or your students, and they've got 7 days with that identity without any further challenges. So it's it's a really common attack vector that we see. Another one we'll talk about quite a lot is business email compromise. So redirecting emails are interesting, particularly things like invoices and orders, and having those redirected to somewhere else, maybe manipulated and maybe sent back, particularly with things like bank account details being changed. Very difficult things to detect. So yes, lots of value in integrating this with your Microsoft estate. Also as well, we talked about Copilot. So we have also introduced some response actions and directly using Microsoft's APIs when our analysts actually discover things like a user that's signed in that maybe shouldn't have signed in, or a session that's been hijacked, then they can actually remotely remove those sessions and reset those credentials without having to call you up, without having to get you involved. So giving you value when you're not around, things like evenings and weekends. Bank holidays, and ultimately closing incidents down as rapidly as possible, which of course is really what the MDR service is all about. So that's just a quick overview of the update. Like I said, key takeaway: 350 tech integrations, working with the stuff you've got included as part of the standard fee. But we have also added in another capability, which is a chargeable upgrade, which is identity detection and response. This is a direct response to the fact that identity is now a really common attack vector for cyber criminals. Almost 100% of organizations experience identity-based attacks. Around 80% of successful ransomware attacks now, according to the latest research in our active adversary report, actually involve stolen credentials. And a lot of organizations fail to set up their Entra ID properly, and there's a massive proliferation in stolen credentials floating around on the dark web. So this is where ITDR comes into play. It kind of sits between the identity management space, which is probably in your scenario handled by Entra, and it's merging the gap between security operations. So ITDR is designed to make sure that you are doing all the right things from a best practice perspective, that your configuration is accurate, and also making sure that identities are not being abused in real time, and then also making sure that we don't have credentials floating around on the dark web that could be used in the future. So all of the attack life cycle there for identity-based attacks. It is considered by Gartner to be a high value investment, and particularly when you see how many attacks involve identity. So that's a great endorsement. I'll skip over to the important stuff because I want to show you basically what it does. So a couple of things it does: continuously scanning your Entra ID environment, presenting you with a list of findings. So these are actionable things that you can change and adjust and alter based on your environment. So it's basically making sure that you've got best practice active. 80 different identity posture checks. So it'll identify accounts that may be are overprivileged, that have dormant accounts, that don't have MFA, that have bizarre login credentials, all that sort of thing. It's also there as well as a continuous monitor of the dark web. So what it's doing here is looking for credentials that have been leaked and stolen, and typically they're up for sale on the dark web. So we have a whole division called the Counter Threat Unit, which is really there to monitor underground cybercrime forums. And obviously we can tell you if your passwords have been breached. Also, what we can do is tell you how critical that issue is, because if it's an old password that is not in active use, that is much less significant than a currently active account with the current password configuration being leaked out to the dark web. It'll also distinguish the difference between users and admin accounts as well. Obviously, there is a significantly higher blast radius when you've got an admin account there floating around. So this is going to flag up to you and let you know, or generate cases if you're an MDR customer to let you know that credentials are out there on the dark web. It's also designed to detect risky users when they're doing weird things. So we have a list of users involved in security alerts, so linked into the Sophos estate, if you happen to be a Sophos customer on your endpoint, for example. We can also flag up where users have logged in from bizarre IP addresses, maybe places we haven't seen before, device types that we've not seen before, if they're coming from ASN addresses that have previously been unseen for this particular user. So none of these things are necessarily malicious, but they are good indicators that maybe something needs investigation. And this is where you and your team can bring in that human investigation to see, well, you know, maybe this user is logging in from somewhere unusual because they happen to be taking some time away on holiday or going back to see family in another country or that kind of thing. So lots and lots of really useful resources there. Again, showing you things like how your identity estate is not necessarily configured properly. So giving you the option to sort through the different types of accounts, who's protected by MFA, who's not protected, and forcing resets and that kind of thing if we see things that are not as they should be. So this is how the matrix looks when you add the two things together. Just the key takeaway here really is that Entra is there as part of your Microsoft suite to manage your identity, and ITDR basically sits as an oversight to that to make sure that you're configuring properly, that you're following best practices. We monitor actively user activity to see whether we see oddities happening there. We monitor the dark web for credential theft, and if we see identity issues, then if you're an MDR customer, that will automatically generate cases for us to investigate. So that is a quick summary of what ITDR does. From a licensing and pricing perspective, prerequisites are either our own searching tool, which is XDR, or being an MDR customer like we just talked about, and then we base it on the number of users and servers that you have. It's available on a monthly basis. It's available on subscription-based licensing as well, just like the vast majority of our products and services. And as you can see there, just as a wrap up, on ITDR, little case study there, little reference from an organisation that discovered significant visibility enhancements and also helped them to improve their cybersecurity posture. So quick overview of ITDR for you. If you want to know more, obviously reach out to the gentleman from Pugh, who will be more than happy to give you some guidance. Then we'll move on very, very quickly to workspace protection. So what this is designed to do is help you bring back control, basically, of your estate from an apps, data, workers and guests perspective. So this is really taking security right back to the place where most issues occur, which is actually on the desktop itself. And it's merging what traditionally would be lots of different cybersecurity technologies like Zero Trust, like CASB, and like Secure Web Gateway, basically all merged into one platform, delivered as a protected browser. So this obviously allows your users to access the web and also access cloud-based applications, all from that contained browser. So it merges together all of these bits of tech. So it merges ZTNA, it merges your SaaS controls, it actually brings in DNS filtering. So this is using Sophos Intel to see whether DNS inquiries are being made to dodgy sites that may be operated by the cyber criminals or maybe containing unsuitable content, for example. I'm going to skip hardened browsers for a second. It allows you to control the data and keep it inside the browser. So it removes, if you choose to, the ability to do things like cut and paste, to do screen caps, to print, download, upload documentation and important sensitive data. So it's containing that data and keeping it in the browser. This extends to viewing emails as well. And then finally, the hardened browser itself. So just key emphasis here, this is an isolated browser. It is not allowed to share information with the operating system. It's not allowed to share data outside of the browser itself. So it's really containing the threat. And this is why it works so well with things like guest users as well. So just to give you an idea of the underlying architecture, this is a partnership with Island. Island have their own Chromium browser, and we've basically built our management platform around there. So it's all manageable out of the Sophos Central platform that you're used to, bringing your own threat intelligence into the equation, but also keeping it quite user friendly as well. So the Chromium browser is nice and simple to use. It is very, very similar to Chrome, as you would expect. So it's really easy from a user transition perspective to move over to the protected browser. And then we'll just hit a couple of the use cases really quickly before I bring the session to a close. So it's great for securing users who are working remotely. They can have this browser and they can spin it wherever they want to be. Doesn't matter where they are, and the ZTNA and the CASB solution elements will bring them together with their data, but keep that work isolated away from their own personal machines. Stop shadow IT. So it stops or monitors at minimum the use of unsanctioned applications, keeping people to where they should be and allowing you to block places they shouldn't be. That includes artificial intelligence. So as great as AI is, there are many security problems and challenges. If you want to build some controls around AI, that is definitely a use case. Controlling the applications you're allowed to access. It can also help you as well with web browsing because of the way that the DNS capabilities exist. Also containing web-based threats because it's all kept inside the browser, of course, remember. And if you roll out this access to guests, then you can allow contractors and third-party members and short-term members of staff like locums and locum lecturers to be able to utilize their own devices, to bring their own kit with them and access your academic resources, and then take that access away when they leave by just simply suspending their account. Again, keeping all of that sensitive data inside the browser. And again, from a pricing and licensing perspective, all super simple. Not got a slide on it. All super simple, basically based on the number of users and servers that you've got. So exactly the same licensing model that you're accustomed to. There are no prerequisites for the protected workspace application, but it does work best with Sophos Endpoint, just because that's part of the installation process, but you don't have to run it with Sophos Endpoint if you don't want to, so it can be a complete standalone solution. So there you go, very quick whistle stop tour. If you've got any questions, I will gladly take them at the end, but I'm just going to hand over to Mark now just to give you some important announcements regarding the Pugh website. So Mark, over to you.
Yeah, Perfect. Thanks, John. Yeah, we've got a couple of questions come in, so we'll cover them. But just very quickly, I just wanted to just go over this. So we have just last week gone live with our brand new Pugh website. So yeah, very clean, modern design. We've got updated vendor pages. So as you can see there, we've got an updated Microsoft vendor page. We've got an updated Sophos security vendor page, as well as Adobe and other vendors. Also solution pages, so things like the software licensing side, the added value we bring with technology, licensing reviews, details and all that, and our T12 lifecycle management services, as well as solution pages for things like hardware, security and AI services as well. Case studies and testimonials, so we've got a few on there at the moment. We've got 1 or 2 in the pipeline ready to publish as well. So in the next couple of weeks, hopefully we'll have some brand new case studies there. So some great stories, go and check them out. And events then. So obviously these kind of events, or we do in-person events throughout the year as well. So yeah, if you head onto the website and go to the events, all the latest and upcoming events will be on there. So you can register straight from there then. The hardware shop is also available from the main site, so you can access the shop from there. So if you need any sort of laptops, headsets, any devices, meeting room equipment, interactive boards, digital signage, that kind of thing, please head to our store and then just give us a call for the best pricing then if you are keen to look at some hardware. There we are. So I think that just covers the site. So next webinar, I've already posted the link in the chat, but the next webinar is on the 15th of April. The topics will be announced soon. So obviously there's quite a lot of updates coming out. So we'll pass on some more details on the topics soon. And before we go to questions, I think Tom is just going to launch a very quick poll. So the usual 2-question poll. Please give us feedback on today's session and also some suggested topics you'd like to see covered in future sessions. Thank you very much for that. And while that pops up, so I think there's a couple of questions come in around the Copilot side, Eifion. So one of them is, could you please clarify what Microsoft licensing is required to access M365 Copilot, and also the license required to use Copilot agents?
Okay, so Copilot licensing, in simple terms, there's Copilot Chat, which is within the browser, which is web-based and pinned into apps. That is free to all staff and students over the age of 13 into education. Now, Copilot for Microsoft 365 is a per user license that you can purchase. The good news is the price has come down fairly significantly from the start, but it is available as a per user option. Okay, so that's Microsoft 365 Copilot. Agents. Now, agents can be run and created within Microsoft 365 Copilot and within the free Copilot Chat. But there's a bit of a gotcha there. Users within Copilot Chat, if they try and access SharePoint data, which is paid Microsoft 365 Copilot functionality, those prompts will have to be charged on a per prompt basis, pay-as-you-go per prompt basis, or you can add it from within Copilot Studio. Also, Copilot Chat doesn't support the full-fledged agents, like the interpreter agent, which not only uses GenAI, it uses underlying Azure AI models for doing speech and translation. So those models don't work in the free version. And if you, in the free version, if you want to use information from SharePoint, for instance, then it's a pay-as-you-go basis. Now, development, Agent Builder, you can do that within the free Copilot chat and in Microsoft 365 Copilot. But there is also Copilot Studio. Now, Copilot Studio is a full-blown development environment for you to create agents. The Copilot Studio license itself is free of charge for you to use, but you do have to set up Copilot Studio for pay-as-you-go licensing. So you would have Copilot credits in the tenancy all linked into Azure as a pay-as-you-go invoicing system. If your users using the agents have got Copilot for Microsoft 365, then the usage is free of charge generally. For instance, the interpreter agent is free of charge if you've got Copilot for Microsoft 365, but there's a limit of 20 hours a month on there. So, you know, they're mostly free of charge in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Eifion. There's a bit of a follow-up question on that one as well. So it's also the license required to use Copilot in Teams.
Say that again.
So it's also which license is required to use Copilot within Teams, as you touched upon?
Okay, so Copilot within Teams. Again, the free Copilot chat license will work within Teams. But the big issue here is that Copilot within Teams doesn't access your Teams meeting and chat information. To use Copilot within Teams, you need the Microsoft 365 Copilot license. So it depends on the functionality you want within Teams. So within Teams meetings, one of the big use cases is meeting recap and AI summaries. For that, you either need Microsoft 365 Copilot, or you can have Microsoft Teams Premium as well. So the best thing to do is to have a chat with your account manager, and we can discuss your use cases and get you the best options that you want. And again, the same for any Sophos inquiries you have. Just speak to your account managers and we can help assist you there.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Eifion. That's all the questions in the chat. But just coming back to something you touched upon, John, you know, you were talking about how Sophos integrates with sort of E5. I'm guessing it's the same then with, obviously, with the academic side, with the A5 and A3. I'm guessing it's the same principles there.
Sorry, you can tell I'm not an education specialist. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't actually have to have necessarily any of the Microsoft sort of additional services. The point I was trying to illustrate there, I guess, was that even, you know, if you go up the suite, then you will get things like Entra, you'll get things like the seam capabilities, which is all great, but it's essentially just more dashboards and more data to deal with. And the purpose really of MDR is to sort of take you out of the necessity to monitor those dashboards yourself, and that basically empower us to go and look at those things and look at that telemetry on behalf of the users, so that we can carry out actions and, you know, stop you missing the needle in the haystack, essentially. So that can be done alongside Windows Defender. So we have our own little agent that lives alongside Windows Defender and sits there in a passive monitor only mode, to collecting events from the endpoint, but also extending things like looking at Windows event logs, looking at your Office 365 logs, looking at your Entra logs, and basically bringing all that data in the interest of transparency, exists in Microsoft, but it's just scattered around all over the place, and then bringing it to the team for them to analyze, and also using, as you would expect, using things like AI and algorithms very heavily to make sure the really important stuff gets looked at first. So yeah, it essentially doesn't matter what you've got, but the more you have, and most importantly, the more you have, but then you have to make sure you switch the integrations on. Same as if you've got a third-party firewall, right? So you may have seen some firewall logos there. If you've got Palo, if you've got Fortinet, if you've got Checkpoint or whatever, then we're not expecting you to throw those things in the bin. We just need to get the log data out of those platforms and then help you get more value out of security products by making sure that those logs are being looked at actively by our analysts.
Yeah. Perfect. Thanks, John. There are a couple that just come through. Can you access the chat, John, or do you want me to read them out to you?
I think I can see them. So what about Sophos Tage's SIEM instead of Sentinel? Where can we get more information on this? Thank you. I didn't want to talk too much about Tage's just because I didn't want to confuse things, but just for everyone else's benefit. Obviously, Tunde, you probably familiar with what's going on. Sophos made an acquisition about a year ago now of SecureWorks, so another MDR vendor, another software vendor. One of the things that they have is a next generation SIEM product. So the best answer to that, to be honest, Andy, is that hang on, because come around about the August timeframe, we'll be making announcements on having that under the Sophos banner. So that is definitely part of our product strategy moving forward. And the really nice thing that kind of wins out against Sentinel is that it is a flat fee. So we're not expecting you to also pay to host the data. You can, in fact, we actively want you to bung as much data out as you possibly can, because all of that data means that we've got more chance of finding the interesting stuff that we need to go and look at. So a bit of a diversion, really, a bit of a change of tactic, really, from the way that Microsoft does things, where you effectively penalized financially for dumping data at them. We're kind of the opposite, like, hit us with your data because we know the interesting stuff is in there. So that will help keep your costs predictable, and also mean you get the better security outcomes because we've got access to the data. And that links quite nicely onto Stephen's question, which is there preferential pricing in the education sector? The shorthand answer is yes, absolutely. So have a chat with Pugh. We have preferential licensing models, and also pricing itself. But that's too big a question to answer right now. But essentially there is actually pricing. Pugh are the experts in the sector. I've exposed my weaknesses in that regard. So, talk to them. We also have education focused account managers that will work with Pugh to make sure you get the very best deal and get the right products for you. So hopefully, Stephen, what you've seen there is, while EDR is great, if you're not got your head in the console around the clock, maybe having MDR and having an extra set of eyes looking at that might be advantageous for you. So talk to Pugh and they'll see you right.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, John. If you want to reach out to your usual Pugh account manager or your usual contact, or otherwise, Tom will be following up with the links and recordings and everything, so you can just get in touch with us that way as well. But yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. I think that covers everything in the chat. So back to you, Eifion, to close.
Yeah, okay. So thanks, Jonathan. An excellent session. A lot of interesting questions. Thanks, everybody. Thanks again. It's great to see you every month. Thanks for giving up your time. So we'll see you next month, hopefully. Bye now.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Take care.